Creativity podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Beryl Young, professional photographer, writer, educator, marketer, coach, mom, and friend. Please enjoy Beryl Young. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity podcast. Today I'm here with Beryl Young, professional photographer, writer, educator, marketer, coach, mom, and friend. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Mari, for having me.
Thank you so much for reaching out to be a guest here with me. I'm very excited to dig into creativity with you today. But before we get to the nitty-gritty creativity, that kind of rhymes, let's just take a moment and let listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So with that introduction, you can probably tell that I am a creative at heart. Lots of varied interests, but I do have a background in professional photography. I ran a business for about 8 years, teaching moms how to best use their fancy DSLR camera. So that was my gig for a while, but that teaching photography really helped me hone my creativity and learn that, like, oh, I just love the creative process. I've journaled forever. And my business really was a creative outlet as well, figuring out all the branding and website and entrepreneurship. So that's part of my story, but I tend to go through these 7-year cycles. So my first career was in education. I was an elementary educator for many years. And during the pandemic, I transitioned away from my full-time business. And now I do work full-time as a marketing manager, which, funny enough, I work for a accounting industry, like education platform.
Mhm.
And those things don't always go together, accounting and creativity. So it's kind of a funny place that I've landed. But that's a little bit about me. I live in Virginia with my husband, and we have one kiddo who's 13. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I love it. And I love that you get to bring the creativity to the accounting world.
I love it too. I initially signed on to moderate webinars and like kick
Mm.
things off. At the time, I had bright pink hair. I don't have, this is an audio format, but I don't have bright pink hair anymore. But I was like, I get to bring some like fun and lightness to this industry, and marketing scratches that creative itch as well.
Absolutely. Well, seeing that you have worn many hats in many creative capacities, what does it mean to you to be creative?
This is a big question to tackle because it means so many things. But I was thinking about this, and I really believe that creativity is this out of the box thinking and using our imagination. And there's a big element, for me at least, of self-care in the creative process. So using creativity as a tool to figure out what we love and lean into it more, and um, find solutions that help us live more productive, healthier, happier lives.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I love that you bring in self-care as an aspect of creativity. What are the pieces of self-care that show up in your life that you feel really nourish your creative self?
Yeah. So I was actually diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. So I have that like hyper focus where it's
Mm.
like, if it's something I enjoy, I will go in the zone and I will focus on it. And that can be a blessing and a curse. Like when you find a like fun creative project, it's great. But
Right.
I also have these like workaholic tendencies. So
Hmm.
in my day job or like I get started on something, it's like, okay, I tune the world out and it's to the detriment. It's like, okay, now I'm exhausted. So
Right.
I use it as that like reset button. I can
Hmm.
pick up a camera and I can go take some pictures and I can get out of that hyper focused state of whatever it is I was working on.
Hmm.
Or even with ADHD, there's these like dips and lows too, where it's like I can't get off the couch because I can't motivate myself to do the things that I want to do today.
Right.
So that other self-care element is okay, what really simple creative tool can I tap into today? And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's picking up a journal, sometimes that's reading a book. A lot of times for me, it's taking pictures.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, I love the that word, the simple or small, because I think when people hear creativity, it can be so overwhelming and so big. So taking just that small step of picking up a book, opening a journal.
Yeah, I get a lot of things with the women that I work with. They will come to me thinking, well, I'm not an artist. I'm not a professional photographer. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I'm like, no, 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 you don't have to be those things to really tap into being creative and owning that you are a creative. It doesn't have to be that way. So I am big on the what is the simplest form of creativity that you can do to open the doors? And you never know. Like maybe I was a self-taught photographer. So it
Yeah.
was one of those. I picked up a camera. I wanted to learn it. I went down
Mhm.
the rabbit hole. And no, I'm not like professionally schooled in photography. I don't have a degree in it, but I
Mhm.
still identify as I'm a professional photographer now. I've put in enough hours and done the work, and that feels right for me, but not, you don't need to have that in order to enjoy an act of creativity.
Right. Yeah. I'm so curious. Why do you think people don't see themselves as artists or creatives, and yet I- they're like yearning for some creative outlet?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do wonder if there is this feeling around, A, my work good enough? Like what do I
Mm,
need to do to
right.
enter this world or own this title?
Yeah.
Um, I think another element of it too is, well, I don't charge for this. I don't have clients that are buying my work.
Hmm.
So I'm not an artist. I'm not a creative. And I also like to try and strip the idea from people that that is the only way to claim your creative, like whatever creative outlet it is that you fall into.
Yeah. No, I that's a great piece and reminder because I think there is space for someone who does something at the professional level in a creative form and someone who does it at the beginning level in a
Yeah.
creative form and everywhere in between. It isn't that all or nothing that I think many people fall into those thought patterns of like, if it isn't this, then it's absolutely the worst.
Yeah. I think about my time in education too and working with kids. Like kids are so inherently creative.
Yeah.
They so easily will just pick up tools and make something. And it's like the best thing ever. And I think then we become adults who are living adult lives. We have careers. And there's this element too of like, well, I don't have time to do this. So I must not be creative because I'm not making time and space for it.
Right, right. When there isn't the time, I'm using big air quotes for it, and we're not making the time. So I imagine as someone who does make time for their creative endeavors and creative outlets, what are some tips or little tools that you have used to tap into finding or making time for your own creativity?
My favorite tool is something that I started way back when I picked up a camera, and started owning the fact that photography was something that I wanted to explore.
Mhm.
And this simple tool that 13, 14 years later is still by me is called the 100 Steps Project. And
Ooh.
it actually came out of the grief journey. I lost my first daughter when I was 20 weeks pregnant.
Mm.
So I share that was many, many years ago, but it was one of those life altering uh, things that happened. And I had been gifted a fancy camera to take pictures when I had the baby. And it was,
Mhm.
okay, well, now what am I doing with this? And I was kind of resentful about it at first.
Yeah.
And I was on the couch, not being creative, not doing much of anything. And so I actually went searching on Google. I was like, okay, well, what could I do with this camera? Because people started sending me flowers, and I was like taking pictures of the flowers and trying to find like little sparks of joy where I could.
Mhm.
And I came across something somewhere that was like, pick a location, take a certain number of steps, and then take a photo. And I was
Hmm.
like, well, I can get off the couch and I can go to my front door and I can take 100 steps. And it was really interesting to go like count 100 in your head, see where you ended up, and then have to make something beautiful out of a very like ordinary situation because you don't always end up like with this beautiful
Right.
scenery. And so not only did that start to like stretch the like artistic tools that I could use with my camera, but it also was this like simple, motivating way to be
Mm.
creative. And so now anytime that I'm having trouble, like I'm not always the best at keeping a consistent creative practice. So I
Yeah.
need that motivation. And now it's still like, no, just get your camera. It can be your phone. It doesn't have to be a fancy thing. Just go take 100 steps and see where you end up and what you can make.
Yeah, I love that. The 100 step project. Is
Mhm.
this something that came from your own? You decided on the 100 steps, or was this something that other people had out in the world and you adopted it and made it your own?
I found it on a blog,
Hmm.
but it was not really floating. I mean, this was before the age of social media, which was
Right.
kind of funny, right? But
Yeah.
even on social media platforms, I didn't find a whole lot of people that were doing that specific project. So now I
Yeah.
do have an Instagram handle. It's called the 100 Steps Photo Project, and people take their 100 steps and they tag the photos. And so I kind of have claimed this quote unquote ownership over it. There could be somebody else doing it out there. That's totally fine. But it
Yeah.
is a big thing that my own creative community has gone, this really stuck with me. And it's something that I do often.
I love it. I mean, what a seemingly simple thing, and yet, takes a moderate amount of effort to walk 100 to count. I feel like if I were counting 100 steps, I might lose count and be like, oh, what do I do now? Or can I just take a picture here?
And I tell people, I'm like, it's not about the 100 steps. Like, yeah, like it's okay. It is interesting the first couple times to go, can I count to 100? I used to joke, like, when I was doing this project with my kiddo who was then 5, I'm like, oh, they're in kindergarten. This is good practice for counting. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah. But it's not about the number of steps. It really is about, okay, walk a little bit, see where you land, take an
Yeah.
interesting photo.
Yeah, I think that gives me kind of inspiration to like, oh, what would that be like in my own neighborhood or in my own life, and putting that into a practice or helping ignite a little different version of creativity in my creative space when I'm
Mhm.
feeling like, oh, I need a little boost and I'm not quite sure what to do. Nice.
100%.
Yeah. Well, you seem to have had many creative iterations of things in your life. And I'm so curious who or what is currently kind of inspiring you or your creativity these days.
This might seem like a weird example. I'll give two, but the first one, I am a big Peloton user. I got my spin bike during the pandemic,
Mhm.
and it took me a while to find the coach on the platform that was the one that I resonated with.
Mhm.
But I took a class with Christine Dergolay, who is one of the Peloton instructors, and found out that she was doing a lot of work in self-talk and self-care off the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really inspiring to see someone who, for those of you that are not familiar with Peloton or with this instructor, she has won cycling world championships. She's done like in her like very early career life, she was an actress and a dancer, and she was able to weave all these very differing interests into like she's just able to incorporate all those parts of herself into what she
Mm-hmm.
does. And so to see someone multi-passionate that's able to infuse that kind of creative life, it's been really motivating for me to go, okay, it's you can reinvent yourself or you can invent
Mm-hmm.
yourself in different ways. And it's okay to have these different pieces and parts of who you are and
Mm-hmm.
integrate them. And to me, that is what creativity is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being multi-passionate creative, or I think so many creatives, we have many passions and many interests. And how do we put it all together for ourselves, for someone else, if that's the journey we are on? And so finding those other people who embody that is really exciting to get
Yeah.
to see and be a part of.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many other creative um, influences as well, but that's really like the most present one right now.
I
My
love it.
mom is also very creative. Like, I feel like that's the very cliche answer, but my mom is a mixed media artist, and she, like, in her retirement stage of life, has found this like art community and is selling her art. She didn't do any of that when she was raising me and my sister. So that's also been really inspiring to see that anyone in any age and stage of life can do more or do something different with their
Yeah.
creativity.
Oh my gosh, that's super inspiring. And that reminder that age doesn't limit creativity, or it it shouldn't limit. And yet I think oftentimes people get to a certain age and think, oh, I've missed the creative bug. I've missed that opportunity. And so when you come across people who don't see themselves as creative, or feel like they don't have a creative bone in their body, how would you encourage them to find creativity in their life?
Um, my first piece of advice is usually, well, to look and see what your interests are, because there's so many ways to be creative, or to ask yourself, what did your 8-year-old self enjoy doing that you
Yeah.
haven't tapped into for a while? Because I
Hmm.
used to say when I was in elementary school that I wanted to be an artist, and that was not what I went to college for and what I did out of
Hmm.
school. But it definitely gave clues to like, oh, this is how I need to create in my life. So that's
Hmm.
like the first thing that I usually ask, look inside, what would be fun to do. And the second piece is finding a community.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we make a lot of excuses for why we can't find time or why
Mhm.
we can't integrate it into our daily life.
Yeah.
And that community piece, almost having built-in accountability buddies or people that are going to do something with us, it brings a whole different level of connection to the creative experience.
Yeah. How have you found your creative community? What was that
That's
journey like?
that's a great question. Part of it was creating it myself.
Oh,
Just
yeah. Okay.
yeah, because when I was starting my photography business, my photography education business, I didn't see a whole lot of opportunities in the world that were the
Mm.
people that were like me, that were teaching how to use a camera in the way that I wanted to be taught. There wasn't
Mm.
a whole lot in the like 2010, 11, 12 era that were moms or women
Hmm.
teaching basic camera skills. It was a lot of um, like gearhead men in my local area that were
Hmm.
like, yeah, here's the basics, and like it all went over my head. And I was like, there
Hmm.
has to be a community for this where moms can get together for an afternoon, learn how to use their camera, have that built in, like they can talk about their kids in this very creative space. So yeah, I created that for myself.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because then once you turn something into a business, it changes it. So
Sure.
yeah. So it was good community for me, but I also was sort of the guide or the leader. So I've had to find other things that will fill my bucket.
Mhm.
Peloton is one of them. And you may not think of Peloton and spin cycling as being creative, but it is just this opportunity for me to let go of all the thoughts in my head,
Yeah.
cycle on a bike, and come up with new ideas. Like some people have their creative ideas when they're in the shower, or
Right.
yeah, I sometimes will go for a long drive and have a really good creative idea. And now it's the Peloton bike that it's like, oh, okay, I'm unstuck. I can get going again.
Yeah. I love finding those activities that help your subconscious mind do some work for you behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said kind of that 8-year-old self, going back to what inspired you or, you were interested in, you wanted to be an artist. But what's your earliest memory of kind of flexing your creative muscles?
Yeah, you shared this question that it might be coming before the episode, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't know. But I thought of a couple things. I do have a memory of being around that like 7, 8, 9 years old, and friends
Hmm.
would come over to our house, and we had this like pull-out couch in our basement growing up, but it wasn't even a pull-out couch. It was like these two foam mattress type things. And my friends and I, we'd turn them into a stage in our basement, and we'd like make shows or plays or whatever. And we try to like act it out. And we'd have to get all the parents, like all of our parents to come down and watch it. It was like the silliest thing ever. So that was one of the memories that
I
came up.
I love it. I have memories of doing that as well as a small child and directing my younger siblings and friends and
Hmm.
recreating videos we've seen or fairy tales or something like that. So,
Yeah. And then radio shows. I would like,
ooh.
yeah, I grew up in the age of cassette players. That gives you a reference point for how old I am. But my friends and I, we would put cassettes in and we'd come up with like, we'd pretend we were DJs and I'm like, it's kind of funny. I had a podcast for a short period of time and I'm like, oh, I'm living out my childhood like radio show dreams by having a podcast.
I love it. That's fantastic. And it sounds like these early childhood creative expressions carried through, maybe not directly, but this experience of flexing creativity in your life and having creative outlets.
100%.
I love it. Well, it has just been such a treat to chat with you. I have one last question.
Hmm.
What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Hmm. I feel like pure relaxation. Like,
Ooh.
yeah, like when you're in that creative zone, like
Mhm.
nothing else can get in. You are totally focused, relaxed, doing what you love. For me, like my whole body just relaxes.
Sign me up for that. More of that.
Right?
That
We all
sounds
need more of
amazing.
that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. If people want to learn more about things that you have out in the world and how to get in touch with you, how could they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram a lot these days. The 100 Steps Photo Project is one way to find me. The other way is be.young.creative. So that's my other handle on Instagram. And then my website is Be Young Creative, beyoungcreative.com.
Perfect. Well, I will put links to those in show notes so people have easy access. And thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
It's so lovely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.